You know what's a sucker to me? A sucker is who pick who he fight with.
Right.
Like if you sit and you go, oh, I'm not going because this.
I won't fuck with him, but I with this. Right.
Yeah, I think I can take him.
Right.
You want to fight? You think?
Heated waters.
Yeah, we are.
Jay Prince versus 50 Cent.
That's right.
You know, and this whole thing is fascinating because we've got, you know, Jay Prince, the CEO of Rap-A-Lot Records, this huge figure in hip hop history.
Absolutely.
And then we've got 50 Cent, you know, this master of media and entertainment.
Yeah, he's always been good at kind of shaping the narrative, hasn't he?
Absolutely. And they're both, you know, incredibly powerful in their own ways, but in very different ways. And so, you know, it seems like this whole thing kicked off with Jay Prince defending Big Meech, the guy you know from BMF, the series 50's producing.
Right.
From being labeled a rat. And that kind of set off this back and forth with 50.
It definitely seems like that's the spark that lit this whole fire.
Yeah, and you know, we've been seeing a lot of this play out online. So we've got excerpts from, you know, video transcripts and social media posts and things like that. So we're gonna try to piece it all together and figure out, you know, what's really going on here.
Exactly, because it's more than just a beef. You know, there's layers to this.
Absolutely. So, like, to set the stage, let's just remind everybody quickly, Big Meech, who we're talking about, right? He's the guy whose life the series BMF is based on.
Right.
And, you know, this whole rat thing is a really sensitive topic in certain circles.
For sure.
You know, it's basically accusing someone of cooperating with law enforcement, which is seen as a huge betrayal.
It's like the ultimate no-no in that world.
Right. So Jay Prince, he's basically saying 50 Cent is being hypocritical by calling out Big Meech when maybe he hasn't called out others for similar actions.
Right, he's kind of saying 50's picking and choosing his battles here.
Exactly. And he's, you know, he's pretty blunt about it too. He's using terms like suckers to refer to people who do that, you know, who are selective about who they confront.
Yeah, he's definitely not mincing words.
Nope. And then there's this whole thing about checking in.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one.
So for people who might not know, checking in is like this old school practice where if you were, you know, a rapper or whatever going to a new city, you'd kind of make your presence known to the established figures there, like as a sign of respect or something.
Right, it was like a way of avoiding problems.
Exactly. And Jay Prince, he actually suggests using a different term for younger people. You know, something like connected, maybe trying to soften the image a bit.
That's interesting because it shows that he's aware of how language can be used to shape perception, you know, especially with a younger audience.
Right. It's like he's trying to control the narrative a little bit.
It seems that way.
Now we're gonna get into some, you know, some things that are a little bit more unverified, but they're still out there. So we got to talk about it. You know, the rumors about Jay Prince.
Right.
There have been allegations of extortion, you know, questionable jewelry deals, even some pretty wild online speculation connecting him and his son to the death of Takeoff.
Yeah, that's some heady stuff.
It is. And you know, we got to be clear, these are just rumors, right? We don't have any evidence to support these claims, but
they're out there.
Exactly. And, you know, that creates this whole other layer of complexity to this situation because even if they're not true, these rumors, they definitely affect how people perceive Jay Prince.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, you know, how much of that is fueling the fire here.
For sure. So then we get to 50 Cent's response. And of course, this is all playing out on social media. You know, he's kind of clapping back at what he sees as threats from Jay Prince.
Yeah, he's not backing down at all.
And he even hints that he's got some ammo on Jay Prince. You know, like he's got some dirt he could expose.
Oh, so this could get really messy.
Oh, yeah. And to make things even more interesting, he reposts this video from another rapper, Top 5, who's been pretty vocal about his issues with Big Meech.
So he's kind of bringing in reinforcements.
Right, in Top 5, you know, he's going hard at Big Meech online, calling him out, you know, claiming that Meech even DM'd him and he tags 50 Cent. Like he wants to drag him into it too.
Wow, so he's really trying to stir the pot.
Absolutely. And he uses this hashtag Big Screech, which just feels so disrespectful, you know.
Yeah, he's really trying to poke the bear.
Yeah, and then, you know, on top of all of that, we've got these allegations about loaded dice games in Houston, which supposedly involve Jay Prince Jr.
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
Right, there's this whole story about a jeweler who allegedly won a big game and then faced some serious repercussions.
Oh.
Yeah. And there are even names thrown around, you know, Little Cam Wolf, Big Capri. They're supposed to be involved in passing the loaded dice. And the claim is that Jay Prince Jr. takes a cut of the winnings. And there's even a suggestion that if you're an entertainer going to Houston, you should avoid Jay Prince Jr.
That's a pretty serious warning.
It is. And it really makes you wonder, what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, is it just gambling or is there something more sinister going on?
Right, and it all makes you wonder, why is J. Prince so fiercely defending Big Meech? What's the real motivation here?
Right. Is it loyalty? Is it something else? Is there something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about?
And it all ties back to this whole idea of J. Prince's influence, right? He's got this king of H-Town persona, and there's this idea that if you're a big rapper going to Houston, you've got to align yourself with J. Prince, for protection or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there are these doubts about what that protection really means.
Right. Is it really protection or is it something else?
And then, we have to look at some of the past controversies and allegations involving J. Prince and his associates. There was the whole thing with NBA YoungBoy getting robbed in Houston, supposedly by J. Prince's people. And then they allegedly demanded a $30,000 ransom for his stuff, his chains and his Bentley.
Wow.
And then YoungBoy accused J. Prince of extortion.
So this isn't the first time J. Prince has been accused of using these kinds of tactics.
Exactly. And then there was all the criticism from Cameron and Mary about the YoungBoy situation and even about Drake's career. They were saying some things that J. Prince didn't like, and he kind of went after them, even threatening them.
It seems like he's very quick to defend his interests and those of his associates.
For sure. And then, of course, there's the whole situation surrounding Takeoff's death, which has brought even more scrutiny on J. Prince and his son Jazz. There was that incident with Duke the jeweler, who was robbed and murdered after winning a dice game that was supposedly connected to Jazz, and this was right before Takeoff's death. And then you got Quavo's connections to J. Prince's circle, and the whole thing with Patrick Xavier Clark, the guy who was charged with Takeoff's murder. The circumstances surrounding his release were really unusual. He got bail and house arrest and a curfew and all these no-contact orders, including one with J. Prince Jr.
That's very suspicious.
It is, and then you've got Whack 100 coming out and publicly accusing Jazz Prince of running rigged dice games and targeting rappers, and of course Jazz denied all of it.
So there's a lot of unanswered questions there.
Definitely, and when you consider 50 Cent's reputation and the fact that he's got this huge platform and he's not afraid to use it, this whole thing feels like it could blow up really quickly. 50 X has a history of tuning real-life drama into content.
Right. He's a master at that.
And there are reports that he's already digging into J. Prince's past, trying to get more information, so this could be a huge power play.
It definitely has the potential to be.
So to sum it all up, J. Prince jumps into this situation between 50 Cent and Big Meech, trying to defend Meech from being called a rat. And this ends up opening up this whole can of worms, past rumors, allegations, potential connections to some pretty serious stuff. And 50 Cent, he's not backing down. He seems ready to engage, and he's got the means to really amplify this whole thing.
And it really comes down to these two very different approaches to power. J. Prince's influence is more traditional. It's behind the scenes. It's about connections and reputation. And 50 Cent, he's all about media and public image. And, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so unpredictable and fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
Where does it go from here? What's the next move? Who's going to make it?
Yeah. And what does it say about power and influence in this whole world, where the streets and the entertainment industry collide?
It's a lot to think about. So we'll leave you with that. What do you think is going to happen next? And what does this whole situation tell us about the way things work in this world?
Those are the real questions.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive today. We encourage you to keep thinking about all of this and, stay tuned, because this story is far from over.
It's just getting started.
Exactly.